welcome to Leading Forward. I am Maureen Dingus, and today I'm here with Ed Kless with Sage. Ed is a repeat guest, our one and only repeat guest, and you were such a favorite that we had to bring you back. So welcome.
Well, thanks. It's good to be back. When I have folks on my podcast a second or third time, I call them recidivists.
Oh, okay.
So,
I was thinking repeat offender, but
Same thing. Yeah, fancy word for the same thing.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to be back, Maureen. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so just to remind folks what you do at Sage, could you kind of run through? I remember last time you were like a consultant to the consultants, the meta consultant, I think you described
Exactly.
it as.
Very good. Yes. So that's the word. I think I coined it, but maybe I stole it from somebody else. Meta consultant, because I spend an awful lot of my time working with people who oftentimes consult with other people. So whether it's an accounting firm or people in an accounting firm who are working with their customers, or even for Sage, our mid-market products, people who are reselling and implementing our solutions in the mid-market, I spend my time working with them. So I'm a consultant to people who consult. So Therefore, there's the meta consultant concept.
So our topic today is going to be innovation beyond technology. But before we jump into that, what's going on at Sage? Are there any exciting things that have happened in the past year that you'd like to update us on?
Well, I think there's always things moving in a technology company. I think probably the biggest cool thing about us is we really shifted over to more of a subscription-based strategy inside our organization, as most software companies have. We also have brought to market our new small business accounting package for SBCA, Sage Small Business Accounting. Very excited about that. Full launch coming up in 2022. We're just about to end our fiscal year right now, so that's everybody else but me is concerned with that. But then of course we continue to make strides with our Sage Intact package, which is the leading really SaaS product in the mid-market space.
Right. So it's kind of interesting that I'm talking to a guy at a technology company that's going to talk about innovation beyond technology. So
yeah, and so there's a brief funny story that accompanies the origin of this. About 5 years ago or so, one of the folks who is my colleagues here at Sage, her name was Jennifer Warwa. Those of you in the accounting profession probably remember her. She had a big following. She has since moved on to another organization not related to the space, but Jennifer was a very busy person. I think she at one point logged over 200,000 miles flying around the world. This is obviously pre-COVID, but I got a call from her at one point where she said, "Hey Ed, I can't be in New Jersey tomorrow, or later this week. Would you do this session for me? It's called Innovation Beyond Technology." I'm like, "Yeah, sure, no problem, Jennifer." And she said, "Don't worry, I have the slides all prepared for you. So all you need to do is just show up and deliver the presentation." I don't know, Maureen, if you ever tried to deliver somebody else's slides. It's not happening, right? So I immediately said, "Thanks, Jennifer, appreciate it." And I kept one of the slides, and then crafted my own session around the concept innovation beyond technology, and said, "Okay, this is good. This is going to be mine now." So I appreciated her sending those over. But I came up with, I think, is some fun stories about organizations that have created some pretty neat innovations that are not technological, obviously. And the reason for that is I think because technology has made so many strides in the last, let's call it, decade or more, we automatically assume that innovation is technological in some way.
Right.
When we think innovation, we think Apple, we think new iPhone, we think Zoom, we think podcast. There's some technological thing, but innovation doesn't have to be. I think we can innovate around things inside the business model as well. And one of the things I like to try to do is to talk about, well, what exactly is innovation? Because there's a difference between innovation and invention. Invention to me is coming up with something completely new that hasn't been done before, whereas innovation is oftentimes putting together disparate ideas and concepts to create something new out of that. And the one example that I and this is the one slide that I kept from Jennifer. There's this great a photo of it's a stroller that has this little sidecar on it, like a little skateboard. And you're pushing the stroller, and there's the one kid in the stroller, and then the one kid standing on the skateboard thing, getting the ride next to the stroller. And so, the innovation here, of course, is these two disparate ideas: is a stroller and a skateboard. If a stroller and a skateboard fell in love and got married, the offspring would look like this thing. And I've got two kids that are 4 years apart, and I think, well, where was this thing when I needed this? This would have been great. I'd probably have a much better relationship with my older son. How many times was he hanging on the back of a stroller going, I'm like, stop, don't hang, So it solved a very real problem, and I got to thinking about that. How often do we bring these different ideas together from different places to create new stuff? And that's really what innovation is. And what are some of the things that we can do inside our organizations that facilitate that and allow for that to happen? Right. The last thing I'll say here, just by way of introduction, is innovation always comes as a surprise. It can't. I do not believe that innovation can be planned. We can certainly facilitate it. We can give space for it. We can try to make sure that our firms are thinking about it and brainstorming and having conversations about these things. But innovation, by definition, cannot be planned. Quite frankly, because if it could be, then socialism would work. Because then you could just plan everything from the top down. Right, we just said, okay. And that's the one thing, unfortunately, I think that socialism tends to leave out of the equation is the notion of innovation, is that things change. And that's the thing that's missing from it. So can firms get better in innovation? Yes, by leaving space for it. But they can't plan it. They can't say, we need to be innovative now. It won't happen. Right. So anyway, that's just a caveat out there.
Yeah. So, okay, one of the things that you touched on that I wanted to ask is, it sounded like there was a problem that needed to be solved. Is that where you're suggesting that folks start with, or is it even more disparate items? So how do you even start that focus?
Yeah, I mean, it always is potentially a problem that needs to be solved, and how can we apply these things together? And a lot of times it's just some creative thinking about things. Let me give you an example that's not part of this conversation, but right. I think really is a good idea example of this kind of outside the box thinking. There's a guy who I'll talk a little bit more about later. His name is Rory Sutherland. He was the vice chair of Ogilvy and Mather in the UK, and he was asked one time to create a campaign for this new thing that they were doing to try to speed up the train that goes between London and Paris through the Channel. Mm-hmm. And they went to him and said, okay, this is what we need to do. We're spending, I don't know, £8 billion or something on improving the speed to take it down from 3 hours or 3.5 hours to 3 hours. And his response was quite interesting at first. He said, well, I wish you had come to me sooner, because I could have saved you a lot of money. I saved the taxpayers a lot of money. And they were like, well, what do you mean? He said, well, instead of trying to speed the journey up, why don't we just put Wi-Fi on the trains? And then he made a joke, and he said, well, let's take it one step further. Let's hire male and female supermodels to hand out free Chateau Petrus for the next 10 years to all of the passengers. We'll save about 70 billion pounds. and people will be asking to have the train slowed down. Right. So because the change in a half hour off of that journey is really not going to make that much of a difference to people. Right. What they really want is a more pleasant journey. And again, this was about 10 years ago, and of course now we see, Wi-Fi is ubiquitous, and people, there's Wi-Fi in planes now and on trains and all of these in public places. And how important and improvement that has made in our lives, right? To have access to that, because on your commute you can work and get stuff done.
Yeah. So maybe getting a little deeper into what the customer actually wants.
Yes.
Not just what you think exactly. The customer wants.
Yeah, I mean, and even though the customer might not even ask for that per se, right? If you ask, well, would you want the journey sped up? Well, yes, of course we want the
Right.
journey sped up. They will tell you that, right?
Right.
But if you're leading them in that, so, but what are some of the other things that an organization can do to make it better?
Right. 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 So, how do you even create an environment where people will start thinking like that, start being able to take those ideas, be open to those concepts instead of being like, we need to be innovative. Let's innovate.
Yeah, we need to be innovative now. I think that the answer is to get a group of a diverse group of people together and have them talk about the situations that they're occurring. And I think the diversity and inclusion initiatives I think have been good. But I think that they sometimes fall a little bit short because one thing that I will always ask is, well, are we getting a diversity of thought?
Right.
Right? Because it's not. I mean, it's not that diversity as conceived of now is necessarily a bad thing. But are we really getting people who think differently together, or do we have a group of people who look different but all think the same way?
Right. Yeah.
Right? And what we want is to create spaces for that diversity of thought to come together and have conversations. So invite the people who are on the front line, invite people who are interacting with customers every day, invite people who are marketing and who are talking to customers, and get them all together in one space to create ideas around, hey, what can we do, and just brainstorm through these, create these brainstorming sessions to say, can we try something like this? And I think that's really one of the keys is to create those spaces and places for it.
Have you seen, are there any recent examples of some innovation that you've seen in firms or in the accounting space that aren't technology related?
Well, perhaps the most important one that's happened in probably the last 10 years is the shift from using shoe boxes to Ziploc bags to bring your receipts to. No, I'm kidding.
That's right. It's much more
Although it's
secure,
actually
right?
kind of true, isn't it? I mean, the customers have innovated to us. Instead of shoe boxes, they bring their stuff in Ziploc bags now. Well, and because one of the challenges I think for especially accounting firms, and I know that your audience is beyond that because you have a number, many of your members are in industry as well, but for accounting firms is that accounting is a definition equation, right? It's not there's really no such thing as accounting theory, although accountants like to talk about it because it's not a theory, it's an identity equation. Right, assets plus equity equal liability. I mean, I think this is it's an identity equation. It is what it is. There's no no invention of triple entry bookkeeping. Or like where we're now there maybe that's something that the blockchain is going to help us with, and I've actually heard quite literally people use that example of triple entry bookkeeping. Right, so perhaps it's possible that's an innovation, but the last really innovative thing that I think came out of the CPA profession, related specifically to accounting, was the statement of changes in financial position, right, being replaced by the statement of cash flows. Right, and that yes, that's an innovation. It's probably more helpful, especially to finance people, but it's not. Oh, that's what an incredible innovation, right?
Right.
So I think we have to begin to think beyond that. Certainly, the use of the electronic spreadsheet was something that's what was incredible. But again, that was really an innovation per se. But let me give you an example that I think is at least finance related.
Right.
Okay, and so this is an example that came out of Germany. There's a car company, I think it was Audi, that in northern Germany they test marketed this a couple of years ago. I think this is 6 or 7 years ago. It was the classic end of year models, and they wanted to sell some more cars. So they're sitting around this ideation session, and the finance people show up with their spreadsheets and say, "Well, here's what we can do. We can take €3,000 off the price of the car, And one guy who was on the marketing team said, well, can't we do any better than that? And, the finance people looked at each other and says, well, 4,000 euro would be better, but our spreadsheets don't work if it's 4,000 euros, so we can't do that. He's like, no, 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 no. Instead of taking 3,000 euros off the price of the car, how about we add 3,000 euros on top of the trade-in value of the car that the person is coming to us with? And the finance people are looking at each other. It's like, well, it's the same thing. the guy says, no, it's the same thing if you're a finance person, just not if you're a human being. Right. He says, and the concept is this: is that the 3,000 euro off the price of, say, a $34,000 car is less than 10%. But 3,000 euro on top of a trade-in of, say, 7,000 euro is almost an additional 50% on top of that trade-in. So they said, okay, well, let's test market this. And they test marketed this in 2 different cities in northern Germany. So, fairly homogeneous population. And when they sold 1.5 times the number of cars were sold where they did get the 3,000 euro on top of the trade-in. That's an incredible increase, right? So when you think about that, and so you begin to think about this, and you probably have seen more and more companies have moved toward this. If you bought a car probably in the last 3 or 4 years, you've seen that your trade-in is usually added to rather than a price off the sticker price, because they found it was so much more successful. And of course, that's one of the dangers with any of this stuff, is that it can be copied, right? But that's okay. It's still a wonderful innovation. And now, how can this apply? Let's say you're in a business that is doing replacing. Say whatever it is that your product does replaces a current product that your customers had. Well, the default value for most people is to offer discounts off their price in order to get the customer to adopt their technology. Well, what if you were to say, no, we're not going to give you a discount, but when you adopt our technology, when you go live on our system, when you put in place whatever it is that we have to offer, we will buy your old system from you and put down a price. In the case, I'll just use the 3,000, which was the example from the car. But it has to really be, hey, we're going to write them a check for $3,000. Not, we'll give you a $3,000 credit, or it has to be. No, we're going to wire you. It doesn't have wire transfer. It doesn't have to be a physical check, but we've got. It's got to be something that we really give back to you. Now, think about what this does too. Is it creates incentive not only for the purchase, but it also creates an incentive around their fully adopting the new thing.
Right.
And one of the things that I hear, especially from technology partners, is, well, we have a difficult time often understanding when they've crossed the line. Like when is our stuff officially adopted, right? Well, this puts a line of demarcation and says, well, when they do, you're going to write them a check. So it significantly increases that incentive as well.
Right. So they that whole running 2 things at the same time forever, because there's just, for whatever reason, the comfort, the training might push people along, and provides the company information that's valuable to them too.
Exactly. So in that case, it's creating the proverbial win-win scenario for both, right? And I think that's what's important. And so I call that that's an innovation around. It's really a pricing innovation.
Right.
I've talked a lot about value-based pricing, which is clearly an innovation as well. But I mean, this innovation I'm talking about is irrespective of how you price things, right? From that perspective. But I think another really neat one is around innovating the experience that the customer has, at least initially, with us. I was just out at the AICPA Engage conference in Las Vegas about 5 weeks ago now, and I'm always amazed by the Aria Hotel there. If you go to the Aria Hotel's website, there's this beautiful picture of the lobby. This big open space. It's very lovely. But then my experience, and there's usually like one person standing at the desk. My experience when I walk into the Aria is usually now a line that's, serpentining around most of this big wide open space, and it took me an hour to check in. And what curiously, the Gaylord Hotel chain did this study a number of years ago. They said that the number one predictor of whether or not a guest was satisfied with the hotel stay was their experience checking in. So if they had a really good experience checking in, they were more apt to want to find other reasons that this was a good place to stay. You know, I think the ice sculpture is very lovely. The meals that they have, the bathrooms were excessively clean. You know, so it really colors the rest of your experience with that. Whereas if people had a bad check-in experience, they're like, well, that ice sculpture is garbage. Look at it, it's melting all over the place. You know? And because what it's confirmation bias. What we're looking for is to just reinforce our original opinion of what happened. And we want to think of this as a nice place, as a nice hotel. And curiously enough, I can recall my previous experience with the RA were like this, 1 hour check-in experience. Well, this last time, and I think this is a great innovation due to COVID in a way. I didn't interact with anybody. My room key came to my phone, right, and I showed up at the hotel and immediately went to the room. Right. Now, could you say that that's a technological innovation? Yes, but it's also innovating the customer experience as well. Right, my experience was dramatically increased because of the way that they handled that.
Right, right. So that makes me think of when we're thinking of other customer experiences, especially things that happen online. Mm-hmm. That whole purchase process of was it easy? Is that mm-hmm. first impression going to change anything else that happens after that? I'm taking a class online. If it was hard to register, then I'm sure it's not going to work. I'm sure this is going to happen. The speaker was not great. It confirms everything after that. So really picking apart what is that first step in the door.
Yeah, and so that's what I think that folks need to figure out is, what is their check-in experience, and it quite literally can be a check-in experience. I mean, you make a great point. This is one that goes back, oh gosh, probably a dozen years or so. But and this, look, I'll pin this on the sages of the world and our first forays into what we used to call e-commerce, and I guess it still is to a certain extent, e-commerce solutions, where what we would do is we mimicked the process that happened in the back office on the web. So you would surf into a particular place, and they're like, okay, well, I want to take this class, or I want to buy this product. Didn't matter. Well, the first thing you got to do is you got to fill out your customer information. So you need your name, we need your address, we need your social security number, we need your blood type, we need all of this information. And what did all of us do when we had that experience? Well, for the most part, we were like, click, close, or back, and who's the next one up? Because we didn't like that experience of having to provide all of this information up front. And the reason, of course, was the back-end system at the time. Well, in order to create an order, I first needed a customer record. Right. So we got to create the customer record first, and we're just mimicking the process. Well, the one organization, there's actually, I can send you the link to this if you want to provide it in the show notes. That Fast Company, it's called the $300 million continue button. That this online retailer increased sales by $300 million by replacing register now with continue, because all of us, what we wanted was the experience of going in, seeing what they had to offer, clicking on something, maybe putting it in the shopping cart, and then afterward, we were more than happy to fill out our name and address and phone number and all of that stuff, because we felt already committed to the fact that, hey, we were wanting this product.
Right.
And again, the Mr. Spocks of the world, the logical people, to them there's no difference. To the engineers, it's like, well, what's the difference? We're getting the same information in the same amount of time. There's no change from an efficiency standpoint. But from an effectiveness standpoint, it makes a huge difference, because the customer doesn't like to be we don't like to be put through the Inquisition before we buy something.
Right. So you've given us a pricing example, an experience example. Are there others that you have?
Yeah, yeah. So, and let's take one that is pretty profound and I think has great societal impacts. And this is another one that was developed by that guy Rory Sutherland that I mentioned. The again, I think this was the National Health Service over there came to him and said, or came to Ogilvy actually, and said, what we wanted to do is we wanted to do an ad campaign, public awareness on a very real problem, which is people are not finishing their entire course of antibiotics. And I believe over there you don't need a prescription for an antibiotic. You can walk into a pharmacy and they'll give you an antibiotic. At a certain level, you probably need a prescription for some of the higher end stuff, but like just a basic antibiotic, you don't need a prescription for. So people would walk in, but what they would do is say that it was take one pill a day for 7 days. Well, what people have a tendency to do with this is they'll take one pill for 3 or 4 days. They feel better, and they're like, okay, well, I'll save the other 3 if I don't if I don't recover from this, and that way I don't have to go back to the store to get this second set of prescription, all of this stuff, and I'll still have this now. In many cases, that actually still does work. So the person does feel better and they do fully recover. However, it creates a very real problem in that because it doesn't kill the bacteria off in the prescribed time, the bacteria that linger tend to be the stronger ones. And of course, we're seeing this with COVID and variations and all of this type of stuff that has emerged out of this as well. And the same process happens with bacteria as well as viruses, right? So whatever you tend to pass on in days 5 through 7 happens to be a stronger strain of that bacteria because it survived the first initial course of the antibiotic. So then the next person that gets it gets the stronger strain, and of course if they do the same thing and take passing on, creating stronger and stronger bacteria, requiring stronger and stronger antibiotics in order to deal with this problem. So it's a very real societal problem. So they wanted to do this ad campaign to bring public awareness to this. And he said, no, I don't think that is going to be helpful. He says, here's what we'll do. Let's do this instead. Let's change the usage, how the customer uses, and say this. We're going to put in the package, we'll say, take 6 white pills and then the 1 blue pill on the 7th day. And lo and behold, what happened is that it significantly increases the people who finished the course of the antibiotic because we then chunked it down into a 2-step process of take 1 pill a day for 6 days and then 1 on the 7th. Now that 7th one can be either the same pill or it could even be a placebo, right? It could be. It doesn't even matter. But at that point, you finish the course of the antibiotic, and it wasn't perfect. People still did their old trick, but even that significant reduction or increase, in them finishing the course of an antibiotic can have a very real effect on some of these bacteria and stuff. And I just think that's a wonderful example of, so what can we do to innovate around the customer usage, the way the customer, and the example that I go to, and I think this has stopped for the most part, but if those of you listening to this podcast are still doing this, if you have your tax practices and you're still sending out the 70-page tax planning guide to your customers, I'm begging you to please stop doing that right now. Because I can remember getting it from my CPA at the time and thinking if I could fill this stupid thing out, I could do the dang return.
Put it in your Ziploc bag and be done, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's just and in fact, I'm less likely to fill out that type of form, right? I'm less likely to do that.
Right.
Now, maybe if you send me a 1-page form that has 4 or 5 pieces, hey, we need these 4 or 5 things for basic planning, I'm more likely to do that. Right. But the 70-page guide is not going to be helpful for me,
so
in the interest of quote completeness.
Right. Is that to figure that out? How do you do that? Do you trace that customer journey, or just have
Yeah.
conversations with them.
Conversations with the customer, but think it through. But look, here's the really interesting. This process, by the way, I think I mentioned, is called chunking.
Okay.
Right? It's the artificial breakdown of what could be described in one step into more than one step, and it seems to work. So and here I don't know. Do you delegate anything, Maureen? Do you have to delegate stuff occasionally inside your organization?
Sometimes,
right?
yeah.
Right. So this could potentially work for you. So again, it's not what do they call it? It's not a Jedi mind trick, and it doesn't happen all the time. But sometimes if you give somebody a 2-step process, do this then that, it's more likely that they do it than if you just give it to them in one step. And I found it to be helpful. Now, is it perfect? No, but my observation is that it tends to increase the probability, which is all I'm looking for,
right.
that the task will get completed. And this works then outside your organization too. So if you're delegating tasks not only internally, but if you're asking a customer to do something, can you make it this relatively short, not the 70-page form, but a short 2-step process for something, and experiment with it to see if you find that there's more compliance with it.
Right. I love that. That's great. That idea of the 6 white pills and the 7th blue, that's I love it. That's brilliant. It's incentivizing, right? This artificial incentive to get to that blue pill.
In a way, it's also what we've seen a lot of, the gamification of stuff,
Yep.
right? And the oh my gosh, look, I have an alert on my phone. There's somebody has commented on my Facebook post or my Instagram or whatever. I need to get back and see if something said something wrong on the internet. I got to correct it.
Right. I was just talking with some folks in the office about these virtual races. Everyone was used to running races, and they no longer exist. So people are running these virtual races and paying a lot of money to just get this medal at the end and pretend that they've run across Europe. It's like an interesting innovation in the world of sports. I guess I don't even know what it is, but it's.
Well, they had to innovate around these things, there's lots of examples of this too, and how it's just changed even entire businesses. Here's another good example that we're all familiar with, but Apple, when it came out with the iPod, they priced the original iPod at 2.5 times the price of the nearest competitive device, which I think was this thing called the Sound Blaster jukebox. So, it was an MP3 player, and they're like, well, this is crazy. Like, you can't price something at 2.5 times the nearest competitor. Oh, and by the way, it came out in October of 2001, 20 years ago, right after 9/11.
Right.
Crazy. So. But why was it successful? Well, because Apple innovated not around the technology of the player. It was cool. They did innovate around that. Not only did they innovate there, but they also innovated around the delivery mechanism of the songs. Because I don't know if you recall, but back in 2001, the model was, if I heard a song on the radio that I really liked, I would find out what band did it, and I would have to go to the store and buy the CD of that band that had the one song I wanted, and as it turned out, 12 other crappy songs on it that I didn't like at all. So I spent $20 on the CD for the one song, and then we had this other competing thing called Napster. I don't know if you remember the original Napster,
right.
which was the unlimited music for free, and it was but the problem was the recording industry saw the fact that there were millions of people that wanted billions of their product.
Right.
They saw that as a crime wave, and literally would prosecute 17-year-olds who had a server in their grandmother's basement. That really happened. That's an actual case. Well, you've got millions of people who want billions of your product, and that seem to be going unfulfilled. You don't have a crime wave. You got a business model problem. And Apple solved the business model problem, which was, how about I just sell you the one song you want for $1? And we were all like, well, that makes total sense.
Right.
I'm happy to do that. Sure. And I don't even have to go to the store? Yeah, absolutely. Let me buy the one song for $1. So that's why the iPod was successful, not necessarily because of the technology, which was cool in and of itself,
Right.
but it was also because they innovated around the business model of being willing to sell the one song for $1.
Right. I don't know if you remember the Single.
Oh, sure.
I spent my younger days working in record stores, and the Single always cracked me up because I think it was $4.99 for one song, and you had to carry around this plastic silliness.
Stupid cassette tapes, yeah. Yeah,
But I
really
think that
wild.
was the, talking about that whole business model of the music industry. It's like they had little glimmers of what they were trying to do, and it just had to be totally blown up before it could get anywhere.
Yeah, no, the execution was definitely lacking, shall we say. But if I could, I want to just talk about, maybe take this down a little bit, because these are examples of bringing stuff together. But I think there's something that's even more simple that organizations can do, because it doesn't have to be even much more than this, and that is to innovate around the language that we use. And so let me give you an example, and this is like a very real one for you. And this might be something that your state society can take advantage of. Do you guys offer training? Do you have the word training on your website at all?
We say learning.
Which is good. That's better. Or learning is better, or education.
Right.
Because just from a marketing standpoint, what can you charge more for? Training, learning, or education?
Right, absolutely. Training would be the lowest, right?
Yes, exactly. I mean, and even if, at Sage, I've tried to get people to refer to it not as product training, but product education. What as a human being, what would you rather? We have potty training, we have horse training, dog training. Horses, dogs, toddlers are trained. Adult human beings, we want to be educated.
Right.
And I think that makes a profound difference for us. One that's near and dear to my heart, because I do a lot of stuff on pricing, is using the word price rather than bill or fee or cost. I mean, I don't like fees. Do you like a fee, Maureen?
No.
I don't like a fee.
Sounds punitive, right?
Any fee. I don't want to pay a fee. And so just refer to it as your price. This is our price. It's much more neutral word. It's and I think it connotes a little bit higher value too. But you might have picked up on this, but even with audiences that are primarily professionals, I will insist on using the term customer instead of client. Now, I get a lot of pushback on that, and I think that there are valid, defensible positions on the side of why we should continue to call them clients. But one of the reasons why I suggest the change is just because I want to break the mindset of what the old nature of the relationship was, which was very much this once a year break fix. In fact, that's where the term client comes from. It's based on a Latin word, clientele, that comes from the same Latin root as the words incline, decline, and recline. So it's got that angle to it. So incline, decline, recline all have that angle. And so the client originally meant one who leans. And it was a word used to describe the people who were served by the lawyers in ancient Rome. Now, lawyers in ancient Rome didn't get paid. If you were accused of a crime or were brought before a court, you were appointed a lawyer, and lawyers that by definition they had to represent whoever it was, right? By the way, this tie into the Bible is Jesus did not get a lawyer, but Paul, I don't know if you're aware, did, because he was a Roman citizen. So he gets because you're a Roman citizen, you get to be defended by a lawyer. Anyway, they were one who. So these are people who were one who leans. They maybe had too much at the Bacchus festival and spent too much time, and then did something stupid, and they had to be fixed. They had to be stood up. They literally had to be stood back up because they were leaners. And I think that persists to this day in a little bit in the use of the word client. Like social workers, for example, have clients. So and that's probably the most pure Romanesque sense of the word, right? They've got to be corrected and fixed in some way. Whereas customer is Anglo-Saxon in origin. It means one whose custom it is. It's their custom to come into the store when they were visiting from the country into town. So it was their custom. And I think that's what we're looking for from a relationship with our professionals now, is more increased interaction, better relationship. Not once a year we send you the tax planning guide, or once a year we take your receipts and fix them. But what is more ongoing? We want it to be your custom to engage with us.
Right. Well, it reminds me of what you mentioned earlier with what is the internal procedure versus that external. Mm-hmm. So internally, we have these words, we have these processes, but it might not always translate into that. Yeah, that other side.
Yeah. Staff. I hate it. Staff sounds like the infectious, staff. At Sage we use, and I really like this term, colleagues.
Right.
We're all colleagues.
Right.
So I really appreciate that. It was actually brought in by a former CEO who's actually no longer with Sage, but that was his word that he insisted on when he came in. To everybody needed to refer to one another as colleagues. He much preferred that term.
Right. Well, Ed,
it's kind of stuck.
Yeah, you've given us a lot to think about. Are there any last parting examples that you want to make sure you get in, or?
No, I don't want to gild the lily, but I think, but let's just say that I think that one of the best things that you can begin to do to begin this cycle of innovation in your organization is to innovate around the language that you use internally. Right, and that doesn't. There's no cost involved in this. Right. There can be. I've seen firms, $5 penalty if you use the old term or something that goes into
the swear jar.
Square jar for getting pizza at the end of a month or something. But I think it's important to begin to think of what are these terms that we can begin to innovate around that just make us change our mindset about the way that we behave. There's a great quote about this guy by the name of Werner Erhard, who is the founder of EST. I don't know if you remember the EST seminar trainings. This is from the 70s. If you're a fan of the TV show The Americans, one of the guys one of the characters in this goes to EST, Erhard seminar training. It was called EST. And Werner Erhard is a very real person. One of the reasons why he's my hero, by the way, is he actually won a tax case against the IRS. So we hold him up in very high esteem. Anyway, he said this. He said he says all change is linguistic. All change is linguistic. If we want to change the anything inside the way that we do, we need to change the language that we're using. And I think it's very, very true.
Right. That's words matter, right?
Yep.
In the very simplest.
Absolutely correct.
Very simplest way. So Ed, I think last time we chatted, weren't you saying you're a baseball fan?
I am. Huge baseball fan.
Yeah. Yep. So wrapping up the season.
We are wrapping up the season. Of course, my team is the Mets, and in fact, I have a chat group on Facebook that some of my college friends who are also Met fans, we pronounced them dead yesterday, September 9th,
the season has
at 9:47 p.m. Eastern time for the season, unfortunately. But yes, I do love baseball. My son's a huge baseball player, so I do. It's a hobby and a passion.
All right. Anything special coming up this fall for you? Fall ball, anything else?
Fall ball, yes. So we got some fall ball started. In fact, there was a meeting last night. There's only 2 months in Texas where you really can't play baseball, and that's July and August. I'm actually kidding. We sadly do play in July and August, but it's really December, January are the only times that there's not something going on. So we go through middle of November here in Texas.
Yeah, awesome. All right. Well, Ed, thank you so much. You're a great supporter of the society. You're always welcome back. So I appreciate all the time you've given us today. So take care.
Well, that's great. Maybe I'll be a 5-time guest one day, and I'll get like the green jacket or something.
There you go. Yeah, I'll work on that.
Okay, good.
All right. Take care.